There are some places in Bengaluru where you don't really need a reason to visit. You just walk in, slow down, look around, and somehow the city feels very far away. And Lalbagh is one of those places. But during the flower show, Lalbagh becomes something completely different. The colors become brighter, the garden becomes busier, and flowers are no longer just flowers. They become history, architecture, art, and stories. Welcome to Windows Seat Story. Today, we are walking through the 2026 Lalbagh Flower Show in Bengaluru. And this year's story is particularly interesting one because the flowers are taking us more than 1,000 years back into Karnataka's past. Lalbagh itself has a remarkable story. The garden's history goes back to around 1760 when Hyder Ali began developing a royal garden near Bengaluru. His son, Tipu Sultan, later expanded it and introduced plants from different parts of the world. Today, Lalbagh covers about 240 acres and is one of Bengaluru's most important botanical and heritage spaces. So, when you enter Lalbagh, you are not simply entering a park, you are entering a garden that has been evolving for more than 2.5 centuries. And this is exactly what makes the flower show so special. The flowers are temporary, but the place where they are displayed carries centuries of history. As you walk through the garden, the first thing that catches your attention is obviously the color. Roses, marigolds, petunias, and dozens of other seasonal flowers create carpets of color along the pathways. And look closely at these arrangements. The beauty is not only in individual flowers, it's in the way different colors, heights, and shapes are brought together. Some displays look almost like paintings, others look like sculptures. And that's really what the Lalbagh Flower Show has become over the years, a meeting point between horticulture and art. The flower show tradition at Lalbagh goes back to the early 20th century, with regular shows being organized from 1912. Interestingly, the original shows were inspired by the British horticulture tradition, including the famous flower exhibitions associated with England. But over time, Lalbagh made the tradition its own. Since 1951, the major themed shows have been associated with India's Republic Day and Independence Day celebrations, and every year the flowers tell a different story. And now we arrive at the heart of the flower show, the famous glass house. This is probably the most recognizable structure inside Lalbagh. The glass house was completed around 1890 and was inspired by London's Crystal Palace. It was originally conceived as a conservatory for plants, but today, when people hear Lalbagh Flower Show, this is probably the first image that comes to mind. For more than a century, this beautiful iron and glass structure has been associated with Bengaluru's horticulture tradition, and this year the glass house has been transformed into something much more ambitious. The theme of the 2026 Independence Day Flower Show is the glory of the Ganga Empire. And no, this is not about the river Ganga. It is about the Western Ganga dynasty, one of the important dynasties of ancient Karnataka. The Western Gangas ruled parts of southern Karnataka from roughly the 4th century to around the end of the 10th century. Their capital was Kolar, and later their political center moved to Talakad on the banks of the Kaveri. For several centuries, they played an important role in the political and cultural history of Karnataka. And now, more than 1,000 years later, their legacy has been recreated with flowers. Just look at this. What appears from a distance to be a huge architectural structure is actually a carefully constructed floral installation. The level of detail is incredible. One of the major attractions this year is the floral recreation of the historic Panchalingeshwara or Nageshwara temple complex at Begur, and this particular location has a fascinating connection with Bengaluru. An inscription found at Begur, dating to around the 9th century, contains one of the earliest known references to the name Bengaluru. Think about that for a moment. The modern city we know as Bengaluru, the technology parks, the traffic, the metro, the cafes, this enormous modern city has a documented historical connection going back more than 1,000 years. And the flower show brings that history right into the center of Lalbagh. The actual temple complex at Begur contains structures associated with the Western Ganga period, while later additions reflect subsequent dynasties. So, this isn't simply a decorative model, it's a reminder that the land beneath today's Bengaluru has a much older story. As you move further inside, you start noticing that the show isn't concentrating only on flowers. There are sculptures, historical figures, architectural replicas, and information panels. And that's one of the things I really like about this year's theme. You can simply walk around and enjoy the colors, or you can stop and actually learn something. The Western Ganga rulers were important patrons of art, architecture, and religion. They are particularly remembered for their patronage of Jainism, and that brings us to perhaps the most famous Ganga-era monument represented in this year's show, Bahubali of Shravanabelagola. The original Gomateshwara statue at Shravanabelagola was commissioned in the late 10th century and is traditionally dated to 981 AD. It stands about 58 feet high, carved from a single block of granite. Even today, standing in front of the real statue is an extraordinary experience. But here at Lalbagh, the idea has been translated into the language of flowers, and that is what makes the flower show fascinating. Stone becomes flowers, architecture becomes flowers, history becomes flowers. And after all the history and architecture, it's time to come back to what this place is really about flowers. This section is where you can really appreciate the horticulture effort behind the show. Look at the different colors, the roses, the tiny flowers filling the gaps between the larger arrangements, the orchids and ornamental plants, and then there are the individual flowers arrangements that look almost too perfect to be real. Behind a display like this is months of preparation. Plants have to be grown, selected, transported, and positioned at exactly the right time so that they reach their best condition during the exhibition. That's one reason the Lalbagh Flower Show is more than just a weekend decoration. And after all those colors, there is something very peaceful about coming back out into the wider garden. The sound of water, the old trees, the walking paths, and the crowds slowly moving through the garden. This is where you realize that the flower show is only one part of Lalbagh. The garden itself is the real constant. The flowers will change, the themes will change, the exhibitions will change, but the old trees, the glass house, the lake, the pathways, and the history of this place remain. And perhaps that's why Lalbagh continues to feel special to Bengaluru. This is Window Seat Story. If you enjoyed walking through Lalbagh with me, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and come along to the next journey. Until then, keep exploring, keep looking beyond the obvious, and I'll see you from the next window seat.